You're listening to the Gutsy Podcast, where we talk about all things real, raw, and ridiculous about running a business authentically. I'm Laura Wallace, also known as the Laura Aura, lover of all things inspirational, owner of Works Graphic Design, and your host on this journey through entrepreneurship. I'm here to help you get out of your head and back into action as a passionate business rock star. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday as we fuel your gutsy. We all know that very special time of the month. Oh yeah, it's our period. And we also know what happens before it and what happens after it and how we're counting the days. And we can definitely tell what's happening in our life based off of how much chocolate maybe we do or do not want. I'm really excited because today we're going to talk about how your cycle coincides with your business. And I didn't even realize that there was a connection between the two until I started to follow our guest today. Cassandra Wilder is a naturopathic doctor and the leading expert in women's cyclical health and menstruation. Known for her passion and wisdom in women's wellness and reproductive health, she is a speaker bridging the gap between science and spirituality. She's also the CEO of Goddess Ceremony, host of the Goddess Ceremony podcast, and author of a women's book that's going to be published later this year. Not to mention that she just earned her doctorate degree in 2017 and has hosted over 50 women's retreats. So this gal is the real deal. Cassandra, welcome to the Gutsy Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Absolutely. So many questions. But first, tell me about your entrepreneurial backstory. Like, how did all of this come about?
Oh, what a question. I think like a lot of us, we're just born with this entrepreneur spirit. And so I remember being very young and always looking for any opportunity to use this entrepreneurial mind that I had. So I was always starting something new. I had like a house cleaning business when I was in high school. And, I was always looking for that opportunity to serve in some way and also think outside of the box. But I later then went to college, got a normal, quote, normal person job. And I found that it was really stifling for me. I felt like I was checking all the boxes on what is supposed to make you happy, meaning, a good job and a good place to live and a relationship and all of that. And yet it felt really empty. And so I decided to do the go and find yourself thing where you quit your job and you sell everything you own and you go and travel. And it was terrifying and yet so incredibly rewarding because that journey is what brought me to what I felt was my purpose. And that was studying natural medicine and also beginning to work in more of a spiritual context with women, helping them discover their passion and purpose while I was doing the same thing. So it's been a wild journey. And now I'm so grateful to do what I love more than anything.
That's amazing. I think that you could not be more right. And entrepreneurs are just born with something different. I don't even know what that thing is. But it's like, it's either there or it's not. And I think a lot of people, maybe are born with it, but don't realize what it is until you really like nurture and lean into it and realize, that's me.
Exactly. Yes.
So you teach women how to connect with their bodies. So just talk to me a little bit about like menstruation and cycles and like, just like kind of give me your version of what that is and what it means.
Totally. So it's a funny thing, as women, we all experience this thing every single month. We get our period or we get our menstrual cycle, whatever you want to call it. And yet how many of us have any connection to it? How many of us would feel that this is in any way significant? Most of us, if we think back to the first time we ever had our period, when we were 12 or 13 or whatever, how many of us feel like that was an empowering experience? For most of us, it was probably disempowering or maybe even shameful. I've heard all the stories like the day that you wore your white khaki pants is, of course, the day in fifth grade where you started your period, or, maybe we just felt like we didn't have support. We didn't even know what was going on in our body. And so we disconnect from our cycle. What I later learned is that when we're connected to our cycle or to our pelvic bowl, we're innately connected to ourselves. We're more connected to our empowerment. It's easier for us to feel joy, and we have more direction or purpose in our lives. And it started to really connect for me when I started to work as a naturopathic doctor, sit in these consultation rooms with women. And while they were presenting physically, with debilitating periods, cysts, hormonal imbalances, they also presented in this disconnect from self, in that they didn't know who they were. They felt very dry. They felt depleted. They felt really unsatisfied in their marriage or their job. Really dry is like the word that comes to mind for me, and that the life had been sucked out of them. And I started to realize when I helped these women reconnect to their menstrual cycle, that glow or that joy started to come back for them. And this was definitely nothing I learned in naturopathic school. There's not a textbook about this. But I was amazed that every single time I met a woman with these debilitating symptoms, there was also this emotional connection. So my work now is really melding together those two worlds, what I would call the science and the spirituality. So healing not only the physical aspect of the cycle, but then also helping women be happy and fulfilled and feel like they have a sense of self. And then in the last few years, that's kind of shifted even more so to serve entrepreneur women specifically, because obviously as entrepreneurs, we need to have a clear purpose. Otherwise, we can't serve anyone.
And when all three of those things are off, it's no wonder we're tired and burnt out and exhausted, right?
Exactly.
When you mentioned, thinking about back to your original experience or the very first time you got your period, I was kind of playing that story in my head. And I remember it was a very like almost shameful thing, almost like, oh no, here I am. Like even having the conversation around it was not empowering. So
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it, and I'd be curious on your take of like almost breaking the cycle of the cycle, as far as like the conversations that we have around it and bringing that to the forefront.
Exactly. I think there's so much healing that happens when we simply have this dialogue or this conversation. And even though people will look at you a little funny, like if you walked into an average room and started talking about your period, right? People would be like, what's wrong with this person? And, as someone that like my entire life revolves around this, and I probably say the word period 20 to 50 times a day, I think I forget that it's taboo still for a lot of people to have this conversation. But this is what we need to talk about so that we can destigmatize it, so that we can actually support women in feeling like they can be honest about what they're experiencing every single month. And why is it that we have to carry this burden or this shame or this feeling of like hush hush about something that we all experience every single month? Like that is so wild to me.
I even think about like even like the shame or like, oh, I can't let anybody know. Like when you have to carry a tampon to the bathroom, there's always this like secret agent man type of move where you're either like shoving it up your sleeve so nobody can see it, or it's in your back pocket, or, let's take the entire purse to the bathroom because that's not insanely obvious. But I'm all about I'm about just like twirling that thing around like, yup, it's a heavy day. So this is what we're going to do. But, like you said, not every woman thinks or feels like that. And I really want to help empower women to just like embrace it. And that's why I love so much about what you do is just we're literally all doing the same thing. It may be on a different day or on a different week, but we're all experiencing it.
Exactly. And what if rather than thinking this was such a weird conversation, what if we were supporting one another during this time of the month since we're all going through it anyways?
I think, it's probably really like mentally jarring right now too for women to think about like enjoying their period, because a lot of times the very first thing that comes to mind when you're like, oh, I'm going to get my period this week is, oh God, here we go.
Yeah.
It's a pain. It causes a lot of like disruption in my life. It hurts me. I don't love myself during it. I just want to lay on the couch and, eat chocolate and ice cream. And so what's your take on reframing just like how you feel about your period?
Totally. Well, I think what you just said right there was key, is reframing. So we all know that our minds create a large percentage of our reality. And so we have to recognize, we have to take some responsibility here in that if we're going into our monthly cycle saying, this is the worst, I always feel like crap, my cramps are always terrible, and think of how powerful these words are that we're saying. Then is it any surprise that we have a terrible cycle that's really painful, that depletes us? What if we reframed that slightly to say, I am open to experiencing a menstrual cycle that is nice. That is easeful. I'm open to listening to my body rather than resisting it. I'm open to experiencing something that is as old as time in a more empowering way. So just by being open to experiencing it with fresh eyes, I think is a really big game changer for women. And as we talk about, here in a minute, how this, all relates to our business, we have to learn to listen to our own bodies. A lot of us have been programmed to believe that as women, we're supposed to be constant and the same, always show up 1000%. There's no time for a day off. And it's this kind of mentality that burns us out and depletes us, because then we're on our menstrual cycle, pushing through, trying to work a 14-hour day, trying to force our bodies to do something that it is not meant to do during that time of the month. And so with my own clients, I see a massive reduction in a lot of these stereotypical symptoms like the exhaustion and the cramps, and the fatigue and all of that, just by giving them permission to listen to their own body and be a little more gentle with themselves.
It's so key, right? Like being gentle with ourselves. I find it part of my life's mission to undo all the things that have been done.
Right.
Because it's almost like this unspoken expected rule. And it's like, well, screw the rules.
Right.
When you're tired and exhausted, and I think that you talked about something really important, is like feeling like you always have to show up 100% or push through, and then add a menstrual cycle on top of that. I mean, gosh, it's exhausting, but it doesn't have to be like that. So that's really where I really want to start like digging into is, first, just kind of what do we need to know about our cycle? We know that there are weeks involved and there's a 28-day thing and all this, but what is a general cycle like for a woman, or maybe even better yet, what could it be like?
Great question. So often when we say cycle, we tend to immediately think of our menstrual cycle, but we actually have 4 distinct phases that we all experience throughout the month. So if you were to think of, a normal calendar month, it actually lines up really beautiful with that typically. So you do have your menstrual time, which for most women would be 3 to 5 days. If it's in excess of 7 days, usually that's a sign of a hormonal imbalance. So that isn't necessarily normal. And obviously when we're menstruating, we tend to feel the sense of releasing and letting go. Our energy levels tend to dip. We tend to feel more tired. And we also tend to feel a little more introverted. So this is why when we're on our periods, we all want to be on the couch with a big blanket, like you said, maybe some comfort foods, and just kind of be alone. That's very normal. And there's nothing wrong with that. After our menstrual phase, we move into what's called the follicular phase. So our hormones start to elevate as we approach ovulation. And you can kind of think of this as the energy of spring. So after this like long winter, this long menstrual time, you feel your energy level start to increase. You may feel a little more extroverted. You have a little more optimism here. Your mood typically elevates. And then by the time we reach our ovulatory phase, which is our most fertile time of the month, this is also our peak time of extroversion, when we have the most energy, when this is a big time we want to do and create. Your body on a physical level is in this creation mode, right? Hoping to get a fertilized egg here so that we can begin to build and create a baby. And in our own businesses or our projects or the things we're doing, we're also in that phase of creation. Then it all starts to dip back down into our luteal phase as we approach menstruation. And again, I think it's easy to think about this in the context of the seasons. So this would be more like fall, where we start to feel a little more introverted again. We feel this desire to close up, to finish things, and prepare ourselves so that we can really be nourished in our next menstrual cycle. And this is the kind of information, how simple is that? And yet, I don't know about anyone listening to this, but I didn't learn any of that. I don't remember any of that being laid out for me in middle school or even, in my education doing all this health work. A lot of it was you have a period and that's about it.
Yeah, I can remember here's a really obnoxious 1-inch thick period or pad that's going to feel uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
this is going to be a pain in your ass for the rest of your life.
Pretty
And
much, yeah.
that was the conversation.
Yeah, and all the boys were like, "Ooh, this is so horrible." And
yeah. So I can already see where some of these patterns would overlay into business. So how can we use these, 4 weeks or so? How do you recommend to your clients, how do you tap into each one of these based off of your business as well?
Yes. Okay. I'm so excited because this is my
Yay.
favorite thing to talk about.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
And I think every entrepreneur knows what it feels like to burn out. I'm sure you know it very well. I have definitely hit that point of burnout so many times, and it happens when we're working against our bodies. So if you're an entrepreneur and you are way over this burnout cycle that tends to happen every 6 months or so, this is the blueprint that you've been looking for in your business.
Oh,
So
snap. Here we go.
I know, let's take notes. So in our first phase, the follicular phase, like we talked about, this is right after our menstrual cycle. As an entrepreneur, this is what we call our initiate and begin time, meaning this is the time to start to set your monthly goals. This is a time to start to take action steps, to begin routines. I mean, if anyone else is like me here, in that I love writing everything down and having all the planners and all the to-do lists and, all the sticky notes, this is the time of the month where you really thrive, because you're setting your entire monthly cycle right now in this beginning and initiating phase. So this is where we plan out the entire month in essence. Then as we start to move into our ovulation phase, like I said, this is our big extroverted time. So this is like our connect and do phase. So this is when we put in the effort 1000%. This is when we totally could work a 14 or 15-hour day. This is a great time for all of the podcast interviews, for the big phone calls, the meetings, all of that. And this is when we also feel really purposeful and powerful. So this is when we do, create, make it happen, hustle, whatever word you want to insert there. This is that phase of the month. Then as we come back into our luteal phase, this is what we think of as our close and complete. And this is going to be a nice sigh of relief or a breath of fresh air for anyone who maybe has a lot on their to-do list and a lot of those tasks never actually get done. Like month after month, they kind of roll over because maybe we don't want to do them, or they're the low priority list kind of stuff. This is the time of the month where we finish everything. We complete all of our projects so that nothing is hanging over us as we go into our menstrual phase. This is also where we start to slow down a little bit, start to prioritize more of that self-care, that time to take care of ourselves. So then by the time we reach our menstrual phase, this is our rest and recharge point. So this might be really shocking to a lot of us, especially those of us that have been really programmed into this very masculine, go, go, go. If you're not working, you're not making money kind of mindset. But this is the time of the month when the most productive thing you can do is rest. Shocking, I know. It took me a long time to get out of that, like, well, if you're not working, you're lazy kind of mindset. So this is our time to soften, to receive. This is a time of reflection for us to think back on the last month, what worked really good in our business, what totally flopped, what could we do better. This is our recharging time. And then this is also when we can start to plant those seeds for the next month. So it really is that simple to set up your entire cycle in this way. And then, like I said, you can simply open your Google Calendar or whatever, plug in how your cycle matches up with your calendar. And now you know when the best time to do things is. So is a big team meeting the best thing to do on day 2 of your menstrual cycle? Maybe not. It's a big
not.
launch, right? Do we want to do a launch, in that menstrual time? Probably not. Rather, what if we did that with our follicular or our ovulatory time when we are gung-ho and we've got all the creativity in the world? So isn't that cool?
It is amazing. Like I can't write fast enough, honestly. It's so simple that I'm almost a little bit irritated that we didn't know this before.
Right.
But it just really makes so much sense if you feel, if you talk about like forcing yourself and your body and your mind to do things, how easy it is to get like irritated or upset or, feel like a failure or start like mentally beating yourself. Like, I can't do this. I don't have the energy to do this, but my masculine energy is telling me that I should be able to do this right now.
Exactly.
Well, if you align it with where you are, it's like, well, no wonder.
Right.
If you're trying to launch a business while you're on your period, probably not a great time.
Right. Yeah. Once you say it out loud, you're like, oh yeah. But it's funny how so many of us for years have operated against it.
I love the idea too of like literally putting it in your calendar. Like, yes. That's an amazing way to take your power back, is to just simply know your own cycle. I think, sometimes we have apps or, we can tell that it's coming because of the way that we're feeling, but like, let's use that for empowerment. Let's know where we're at.
Yes, exactly. This really is our superpower. So we have to tune into it and make it our power rather than our limitation.
Mm, make it our power rather than our limitation. Write that down, ladies. I can see too, like how stress and your cycle correspond with one another. So
Yes.
how, you know, how does, what does stress do to our body and how does that affect our cycle?
Oh my gosh. I think in recent years, science has finally caught up with something we all innately know, and that is stress is more harmful than just about everything. I saw a study recently that prolonged stress is equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
Mm,
And so, even if we're going to yoga and drinking the green juice and all of that, if we are not prioritizing ourselves, if we're letting our business take over our lives, if we are, allowing ourselves to have a low quality of life in general, then all that other stuff is kind of canceled out. So, especially in terms of cyclical health, chronic stress depletes our hormones, it changes our gut health, it changes everything about our cycle. It's not uncommon in big stages of stress for our menstrual cycle to just disappear, to be absent for a couple months. And so, this is why we have to start to listen to our bodies and our cyclical health so that we have this outline or this blueprint to be able to keep stress at bay, because Lord knows being an entrepreneur can be stressful.
to say the
and
least.
Right. I mean, and we could say being a human being really is stressful. That's the thing, right? So we have to learn how to listen to our own bodies so that we don't hit this burnout, we don't live in chronic stress, and we don't run ourselves into the ground.
Yeah, and I think it's just learning through little and big ways like this of how to really lean into that. And it's, another one of those like weird taboo things is, self-care is selfish and like, oh, there
Right.
you go again. And oh, you're doing that for yourself again. And it's like, hold on a second.
Right.
I think that somewhere along the way, people forgot that people are people and
Right.
that our bodies are literally the only thing that we have.
So true. And any of us that have ever had health problems, oh, we know that. We know that very well.
Yeah, and so just like treating your body and your mind and your space, your physical space is like the most sacred thing that you've ever been given because it literally is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a powerful thing for all of us to remember. It's especially as an entrepreneur, I think it's easy to prioritize a lot of things above our health. And I've been that person, that's up till 3 a.m. because I have to finish this, really important blog or email or whatever. We push ourselves because we have this belief that other things are more important than ourselves or our health. And so this is that big reminder to everyone listening that your health comes first.
It sure does. And burnout, that's come up a couple of times. So I want to dig into that a little bit is, when you are burning the midnight oil and you are going 100 miles an hour and you're not allowing yourself to stop and you're not taking self-care, and then what happens then to our cycles, they do get kind of gnarly.
Right.
Your body's pissed. So what what connection and how do you guide some of your clients to just being aware of what burnout is, but then how to overcome that?
Ooh, what a good question. The thing with burnout is there usually are signs, and I've heard some people say you get feathers before you get bricks. So meaning your body will start giving you like little nudges, like, "Hey, you didn't sleep super good last night," or "Hey, your cycle's 4 days late this month." And if we don't listen to that, then we start getting bricks. We can start getting hit over the head with like, "Hey, here's a 2 week period," or "Hey, here's some like severe gut disorder that's suddenly come out of nowhere." Seemingly, right? Quote, out of nowhere. And we
Yes.
have to learn how to listen to those little signs from our bodies. So I've noticed, I was kind of the queen of burnout for a long time. I was really programmed to be in this masculine mindset. Looking at my dad, who was an entrepreneur, he was 1000% all the time, 16-hour days always. And so in my mind, to be worthy of being a good entrepreneur, you had to do the same. And so it was such a rewriting for me in my own story to understand that that doesn't work, right? If I want to stop feeling like crap every couple months, I have to start to listen to these feathers long before I get the bricks. So learning how to listen to the little subtle things that you get when you're in that early stage of burnout is essential. So for some of us, it might be that fatigue. It might be the cyclical change. It might be losing our appetite. It might be trouble sleeping. And when you start to recognize your own pattern, then you can start to shift it before it gets to the full on point. And for a lot of us, the best way to just shift that is to up the self-care, is to, turn off the computer at 4 o'clock and not turn it back on the rest of the night. Wow. Like, how hard is that for a lot of us? For some of us, it's a social media free day. I'm such a big proponent for at least having one day a week where you don't go on Instagram, don't go on Facebook, none of it, and instead are completely present with yourself in your own life. So we're not in that comparison game or that work mode that's so easy for all of us. So coming back to yourself is essential. And like you said, self-care is not selfish. It is self-preservation, to say the least.
Yeah. See, I mean, it's just so easy. I was thinking too, when you were just talking, is like, taking the social media break would probably be really beautifully aligned with your menstrual week.
Mm-hmm.
Because when your mind is already kind of rampant at that moment, comparison and, you can't rest when you're looking at everyone else hustling. And I think that misaligning where you are in your journey or even in your month compared to where someone else you could be on your menstrual when someone else is in their ovulation, but when you're laying there, you're thinking, well, here I am again, just like laying around and I'm lazy and worthless.
Right. Oh, and like, how quick does that self-sabotage kind of talk boil up to the surface?
Oh man, it's like a flick of the wrist.
Right. Yeah.
You've brought up a couple of times, and I'd love to just learn a little bit more about your journey about, not working harder and hustling 24 hours a day or working 14-hour days does not equate success or abundance or peace or just a healthy life. So what was that journey like for you to make that switch and getting more into, you talked about the feminine art of receiving?
It's ironic because I've taught about this for so long and, I've led these retreats and these circles for so long. And yet in many ways, I honestly wasn't totally embodying it myself, because when you're leading all these retreats all over the country, when you are, doing a podcast every week and writing a blog 5 days a week and, running your entire business by yourself, it's very challenging to actually practice what you preach. And so it wasn't until I hit my worst burnout cycle yet, where I literally was like, I'm done, I'm leaving the country. I just close up the whole thing. I'll get a new name. I'm done. If this is what success looks like, yay, I hit the, whatever dollar amount that I'd always wanted, but I feel terrible. I haven't talked to my partner in 3 days because, I'm oblivious to him and what he's doing. I'm totally glued to my computer. If this is success, then I don't want it, because my quality of life is zero. And sometimes, like I said, we get those feathers before bricks. Sometimes we need the brick to wake up.
Sometimes it's like a whole masonry crew comes charging at you.
It's so true. Yeah. So the whole building just fell on me at that point, and more than one brick, like you said. And it was that time for me to come back to why I was even doing any of this, and how had I lost my way in this entrepreneur journey? Was I still true to what my mission was at the very beginning, or was I now caught up in the number of likes, the dollar amount, the engagement rate, these metrics and things? And that in itself is such a masculine way to look at a business, rather than how am I serving? How are people being impacted by this? And what is the outreach that I really have in the work that I do? So it was that slow, painful process of starting to peel back these layers and come back to what I truly love and why I did this in the first place. And then honestly, shout out to just getting help, really, getting a virtual assistant or hiring at least someone to help you in those moments, in those days when you're I can't show up fully, or I can't post on social media, I can't send that email. Can you do it for me? That really was a big game changer for me.
Yeah, it's entrepreneurship is one of the coolest journeys, but it's such an unknown path. I compare it a lot to parenthood. There's no magic wand or book somewhere in a library that teaches you how to do it.
Right.
But just knowing your strengths and weaknesses, I think, are really important. And there's a time and a season where you kind of have to do it all. But I think one of the hardest things for entrepreneurs is knowing when it's time to not do it all.
Exactly. We really become masters of everything we do. Every entrepreneur I know could build a great landing page, figure out, like all these like random things that you think, are very specialized. And yeah, learning how to be like, I could do that right now, but it's actually not in my zone of genius, and it might be worthwhile for someone else to do that is kind of a big shift.
Oh, I love that. Zone of genius.
Yeah, isn't that good? I read about that in I think it was a Forbes article a few years ago, and it was so brilliant. They encouraged you to take a sticky note, and on every sticky note, write one task in your business. So for most of us, we're going to end up with like 100 sticky notes for like post on social media, write the blog, send the newsletter, schedule clients, like every like tedious little task that you do in your business. And then you put it into 4 separate columns. So one is the stuff you love doing and you're really good at. The other stuff is stuff you're good at, but you don't really like doing. Let's see, what were the other 2? One is stuff that you don't like, or well, let me see, hold on. Stuff that you don't like doing and you're bad at. And then the last one was stuff that you are not good at, but you like. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to update this for you. But essentially, you're trying to boil down the things that you are actually good at and enjoy doing, and that's your zone of genius. And everything that's not in that category, it's better to delegate. And I was like, what? Like, there are so many things in my business that I don't like doing, and I've been like pushing through and just doing it even out of resentment.
Yeah.
And realizing that was a disservice to all of the other tasks that I could be doing that I'm far better at and do enjoy was pretty mind-blowing.
It is. And if you think about like all the time and energy that go into some of those tasks that like really honestly, you shouldn't be having your hands on at all.
Yeah.
How much energy that takes away from like the purpose and the guidance that you provide, not only to yourself, but to your people.
Yes.
Like how much more could you be giving and serving your people when you're just like naturally, if you kind of think of it as, your ovulation cycle, like when you're just like completely on, it's the same with your task. Very quickly and especially like right now, the whole world is kind of upside down.
Mm-hmm.
I even as an entrepreneur have relearned, I should say, very quickly the things that I absolutely adore and the things that I should never touch again.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of wisdom in being honest about that. And yeah, really saying, I could do this, but I really don't want to.
I love too how you talked about like the feminine art of receiving, letting yourself soften. We talked about back in episode 59, the power of sexual healing and talking about feminine energy versus masculine energy, which was super empowering. So I'm curious how you align or invite that feminine energy to be part of and, coincide with your cycle.
Yes. So a big thing in my business is always trusting my intuition first and foremost. And that can be challenging for a lot of us because we grew up in a very masculine world. Logic is certainly valued so much more than emotions. And so most of us disconnect from our intuition, even when we're still very young, because we learn that emotions are very much secondary, if not like way further down the totem pole than that. And logic, things that make sense, is how the world works. And when you learn how to soften, you do learn how to trust those instincts or those intuitive nudges that you get, the things that don't make sense on paper. And how many of us, have been in a business meeting or, been communicating with someone that on paper, it would make a lot of sense. This is a great collaboration, or this is something we want to do, but our gut says, maybe not, maybe not. Or, we have this grand idea. This happened to me recently. I had this big idea of what could be such a great course in my mind. And when I really started to hash out the details, it felt empty. It felt like this, yeah, I can fluff this up and yeah, I can try and force it to be something. But when I really tune in, this isn't for me. This isn't my project. This isn't something that I can really offer out of integrity because my heart is not in it. So softening is that art of listening to your own body, listening to your gut, and then certainly, as we've been talking about, honoring your cyclical ebbs and flows throughout the month.
There is so much power in this. I mean, I literally feel like you have given the keys to the kingdom to a lot of women today, honestly, because it's just so empowering. And I would bet, and would love your take on this, but I would bet that when you start allowing and you start receiving and you start like really leaning into these different cycles, a lot of what those, like what we typically think of when we think of our cycle, which is, exhausted and painful and like, oh, it just like runs your life. Does that start to actually like ease up? Like, can you actually have like an enjoyable period?
You really can, Laura. And I know that sounds crazy. And I know someone is in their car right now, like, no, this is not a thing. But it really is. It really is. Your cycle can become your greatest strength, something you truly and earnestly look forward to because you've reframed what the entire experience means for you. I mean, if you think that your menstrual cycle equals you getting to rest, reflect on your business, take it easy on yourself, listen to your body, be more intuitive with what you eat, with what you're doing. Like, doesn't that sound amazing?
That sounds like magic.
Yeah.
Wow. It's just mind blowing. So I'm curious to, I think a lot of women are not super clear, and there's obviously a bajillion articles in the world, but, you know, what is normal versus what is not normal? Like, what should we be queued up for and just have our eyes out for to know, like, yeah, this is completely normal. I can lean into this versus like, okay, something may be off or wrong somewhere.
That's a great question. I think looking at extremes is always really important here. And usually we know if something is significantly off. If our cycle is really irregular, if our cramping is like literally a 10 on the scale where you can't get out of bed for a few days, massive clotting, exhaustion that really does like leave you in bed for days. These are all symptoms that are very extreme and would indicate that something is off, whether that's with our thyroid, with our hormones, we have a severe mineral deficiency, something is going on. And I think this is another powerful moment of knowing to listen to your body and listen to these nudges, because if you're having any sort of symptom, there's a meaning behind it. It's not there to spite you. It's not there to make your life harder, but rather it has a message for you. So be willing to tune in and listen.
Any symptom has a message. It's just, you have just a beautiful way of reframing the mind. It's just really, it's just very eye-opening. What would you suggest is a first thing that women do if they're saying, yeah, okay, you just said one or a handful of things that I'm experiencing on a regular basis? What do you recommend that they do first?
I think the most important thing is to get support immediately. So whether you go to your regular doctor or you work with someone like a naturopathic doctor, either way, getting you real tools that are going to nourish you is essential. So with naturopathic medicine, we look at the entire person. And so we're really asking, but why is this happening? So we don't just, attempt to make you feel better in the short term. Rather, we want to know, why is your cycle this debilitating? Is there a mineral deficiency? Is there something we need to rebuild in the body? Do we need to shift some things hormonally so that we can really fix this at the root and eliminate this from ever coming back? And so it's really essential, I do think, to get support immediately. Therefore, it doesn't manifest into something far more extreme.
Amazing. This has been such an incredible conversation. I'm curious, is there anything else that we need to know? Is there anything else that you're just feeling really called to share about the cycle or entrepreneurship or anything that's ringing true to your heart right now?
Yeah, I am feeling something big, and that is to offer every single person listening to this permission to listen to your body, maybe for the first time in your life, to listen to what you're naturally craving and needing, to listen to these natural ebbs that you get, those moments when you feel introverted and the moments when you feel incredibly social. Know that these are all key parts of your cycle. These are all teaching you something. These are all here to liberate you and give you more offerings to come back to yourself. So this is your permission to tune in, to listen, and then to follow through with it. If you do that simple act of simply listening and following through with it, you will notice your entire experience around your cycle transform.
Oh, beautiful. That needs to be on a poster. This is a really large wall-size poster.
Now
Wow.
available on my website.
Now available. There you go. Cassandra, I'm curious, what does gutsy mean to you?
To me, it means bold and unapologetic.
You can't see me right now, but I'm like literally doing a fist pump.
Yeah.
Yes. I know that our guests are going to be like insanely hungry to find you, to connect with you. So what is the best way? How can our guests connect with you?
Yeah, so if they're interested in all of this about cyclical business and healing your cycle, they can go to CassandраWilder.com. Or if they're interested in the retreats or more of the online or in-person gatherings, all of that's at goddessceremony.com.
Beautiful. Well, I cannot thank you enough. This has just been such a beautiful and refreshing conversation. So thank you, not just for being who you are, but just for being present for females and entrepreneurs, and really just helping us to feel empowered in a space that we felt once ruled our life.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's been an honor.
It's my pleasure. Join me this week as we take our power back by eliminating a word from our vocabulary that tends to run our life, and that is the word should. If you want to check out previous episodes of the Gutsy Podcast, head over to thegutsypodcast.com. And for more tips, tricks, and gutsy insight on your life and business, follow me personally on Instagram at @ThatLauraOra. And of course, and until I see you next time, stay gutsy.